Hello and welcome to Coach Connect Live, everyone. So glad to see you all here. My name is Eloise Eonnet, and I am the Director of Coach Connect at the Muse. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with what Coach Connect is, it's the place you can come to find a career coach to help you take that next step in your career. So whether you're looking for some career clarity, or you're actively in a job search, or you're happy in your position or at your company, but you want to take that next step, you can come to Coach Connect and we will match you with a coach to help you take that strategic next step. And every month I'm joined by one of our fantastic vetted coaches to talk about a subject that's interesting to you, that can add value to your career. And I am particularly excited to talk with Jonathan today about making a career pivot, and specifically how to craft a resume for a career pivot. And I've been talking to a lot of clients and people and job seekers recently who are really thinking about making the leap or are trying to make that switch. And it can be some of the most exciting moments in a career is being bold and following the things that you want to do rather than sitting back on the things that you've already done. But it can also be incredibly perplexing and sometimes challenging. So I am thrilled to be joined by Jonathan today. Jonathan, thank you so much for your expertise, for your time. So happy that you're here.
Yeah, super happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So to kick us off, before we jump into the tips and tricks and ideas and structures perhaps that you want to share with our audience today, really around creating a strong resume, a strong document for these career pivots, I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself a little bit to our community here and tell us a little bit about you before we kick off.
Sure, yeah, thank you. So I live in Southern California. I went to UC Berkeley, started working actually in, starting within the corporate when I started in consulting back in 2017. So I pivoted over to coaching about a year in, very early on in my career. And I thought I'd climb the corporate ladder. I had my life really set up around this whole vision, but I found out early on that it just wasn't for me. And luckily, I was able to find my true passion early on in career coaching. And that's what I've been doing since 2017. And I think I've been with the Muse since 2022. And here we are. Some of my favorite services to offer are resume and LinkedIn optimization, bios, and job search coaching. And what I do is I cohorts of job seekers until they land their next job. So my areas of expertise as a career coach are reverse engineering the job search, one via building those tactical tools, and two, by providing accelerated coaching and support all the way through until folks land their next job.
Nice, such important work. For any of you who are interested in working with Jonathan, you can find him on the Muse's coaching page. So go check him out. And we will be sharing also a promo code to get a discount to working with him at the end of today's session. So stick around for that. Jonathan, so you work on resumes all the time, and I know that you face the fears with your clients on this document that has so much importance and so much significance in this job search. And a lot of the people that I've spoken to who are in this specific pivot situation, right? So looking to go from, I don't know, education to project management, for example, or any version of that. There's often this fear of, well, my past experience is not going to make anyone interested in what I want to do next, right? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on creating this document, and I'll let you take us away a little bit. And there is a little bit of a delay, everyone. So if you're seeing that on your end, I'm seeing it too. But it seems to catch up every few seconds, when there is a little bit of a delay. So Jonathan, I'll let you know if there is too much of one. But so far, so good. So let's jump in. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on making this document during a career pivot.
Yeah, so I'll just start by saying, in a post-COVID world, pivots have become the norm. It's much more common rather than it used to be. So there should be no shame or fear. It's become a very normal thing. One thing I'll also say prior to the resume is that when you want to make a pivot, the strategy and end goal should really be crystallized prior to working on your resume. So many people come to me often and say, I'm not sure what I want to do. I just want to do something different. And that's not the ideal state to be in. The best is to do your homework, do your research, and then come in with a plan that we can execute on. So just wanted to insert that right off the bat. And that can include things like salary expectations, certification requirements, licenses, timelines. So nothing should ever come as a surprise when you're at the application stage when you're making a pivot. That's just a rule of thumb. Now, moving on to the actual document. So when it comes to a resume, just a quick refresh, right? Ideally, you want to have 5 sections on your resume. So we have the headline, the summary, skills, experience, and education. That's kind of the baseline structure that I always like to start with. And education can include, obviously certifications, and there are always add-ons within each section, but that's the structure. So what you want to do is use top section immediately to grab attention and tell the story that conveys you are making a pivot. So some people try to hide this. I don't recommend it. I recommend being open, owning it, and sometimes people will appreciate, oftentimes, and it'll gauge their interest, like, oh, this person is looking to pivot, and it may resonate with them. It's something to be open about. So with the top section, we want to focus on, like I said, having a headline, summary, and a skills section. Another thing we want to focus on doing is highlighting your transferable skills on a resume. This is probably the biggest part when it comes to making a pivot. For example, let's say you mentioned, Eloise, if you're an education professional and you want to transition into tech, so you want to work in customer success. So immediately, if you think about it, you have plenty of those transferable skills, such as project management, customer service, scheduling, logistics. Most jobs have transferable skills. You just have to dig deep. And if you aren't sure where to start, just read the job description of the role that you're applying to. And as you go through those required skills, ask yourself if you've done that thing in your own field respectively. And if you have, throw it on there. There's no reason to be shy or humble. The job search is like a mega sales pitch, and you want to give it all that you have.
Yeah, I love that. And so, sorry to interrupt, but so basically what I'm hearing is there are all these sections that we need on the resume. And when you're engaging in a pivot, what I'm hearing is like, own it, right? Own the pivot and take it upon yourself to create that narrative, that career narrative, so that the other person reading your resume is not the one creating it for you, right? So you're saying, you're owning the pivot and you're saying, here's the reason why, or here's what I want to do. And then here's what makes me a legitimate candidate because I have the skill sets that are necessary for that pivot. Is that right? Is that the right idea?
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to have, let's say you are that transitioning teacher and you just send a complete teacher resume for that customer success role in tech. The person looking at it is probably going to think you applied by accident, or like this has nothing to do with this job. Why is this person applying? If you say transitioning into tech and here are my transferable skills. Oh, okay, now I get it. I get why this person is here. Let's evaluate, right? So exactly, I would say you said it well, Eloise.
Great. Yeah, nice. Cool. Okay, so what's the next step?
Yeah, so back to the headline. The headline is up at the top, often a title or a combination of title and industry. What you want to do is tailor the headline for each role that you apply to. So going back to our example, let's say you're applying for a customer success associate role. I would put that as your headline. Now, I know there are different takes on this. Some may not agree necessarily, but I'll tell you why. Because right underneath the headline, you have space to put a tagline. And I really like this tagline concept. The tagline basically clarifies what's going on. So under that top section where it says Customer Success Associate, you'll have a little line below it that says former educator transitioning into project management within tech. So now we get what's going on. And remember, this is the first thing that the reader often sees. It's right at the top under your name. So again, the tagline really helps clarify why you're putting your headline as it is. The next section that I'll jump into is tailoring your job titles and previous experiences from your work history, especially from internal roles that you've held, to appeal to external companies and the targeted goal. So, and again, this may be controversial, some may not agree, but I found great success with my clients taking this approach. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you were a talent acquisition specialist. You worked in recruiting and you're targeting a sales role. Go ahead and change your title to business development specialist. Why? Because essentially you're doing the same work. You're sourcing, you're doing cold outreach, you're trying to convert people, get on sales calls. This is very transferable. And in essence, it is doing business development work. It's just your company called it talent acquisition. But for external purposes, you're showing everybody, hey, look, I actually did do sales. I just did it under a different title.
Interesting. So again, you're shifting the narrative to make sense to the person who's reading your document, right? It's not necessarily using the language or the narrative that made sense before, but it's thinking beyond this pivot and saying, well, how can I slightly rewrite or edit or shift the vocabulary for it to be truthful and also make sense to a hiring manager or recruiter? Oh, we lost Jonathan. But he'll join back in just a second. We'll let him back in. But basically it's that, right? What I'm hearing him say is this document, there are very many different, oh, Jonathan, there you are.
Hey.
Great. Can you hear me? Fantastic. Yeah.
So I was just about to answer your question and got disconnected.
Okay, great. Go for it.
Yeah, as long as you can truthfully speak to something, right? You want to be able to answer if they ask you about it. And as long as you can, then go ahead and position yourself with the text and the content that matches and aligns with that role. So in that example with the BD special, with the business development, you could say, yeah, I was a recruiter. In essence, I was really doing sales work, and they'll get it. They'll get it right away.
Yeah.
Another option is to put talent acquisition / business development specialist. So you can get creative with it. Ultimately, this is a marketing tool, and we want to make sure you're marketing yourself in the best way possible so you're not selling yourself short.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I'm hearing too, the benefits of this is twofold, right? Number one, it's going to get you through the ATS system, applicant tracking system, right? So the keywords that people are looking for, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, Jonathan, you can slow me down, right? But it's going to help that resume actually get to a human. And then once that human sees it, they're reading the narrative that they want to see. And that's going to spark interest in you as a candidate.
Yeah, I would say definitely that you're tailoring for a human. Consistency around ATS systems and how they work. But so the rule of thumb I would just follow is just write as if you're writing for a human, and you follow all the right steps with the rest of your strategy, like timing of applications. Everything else should line up eventually. It's just a matter of consistency.
Nice, great.
Awesome. And then I'll just mention one last piece here. Don't solely rely on a resume in a job search, especially during a pivot. Networking is extremely important, and leveraging your LinkedIn first can make all the difference. Using LinkedIn to identify decision makers at companies you want to work at, reaching out to them, telling them your story, and sending personalized outreach. This is going to be, in many cases, even more powerful than just the resume. So having the resume is critical, obviously, because you're going to have to use it at some point, no matter what. But think beyond think outside the box. There's more to it. And if you feel like you're not getting any traction, definitely start looking at LinkedIn and the tools that you can leverage there.
Yeah, that's great. Right. It's like we create this document, it's written down on paper, and yet its goal is to be used as a conversation starter, as a networking tool, as a way for you to engage people in wanting to hire you, right? So it's not only building it, but it's also taking ownership of it and the narrative that you're choosing for yourself on that specific document. That's great. Jonathan, we have several questions that have come in. that I'd love to just throw your way, and we can get as many of these questions as possible answered for our audience. One is really linked to what we were just saying, and perhaps we can just close the loop on that. But one of our members here asks, how do you tell your story in your own voice while still adding in all those pesky keywords, right? So you talked about writing for a human, which is a framework I think is really nice. But do you have anything to add there as far as style, right? Or someone's voice, especially perhaps if they are going into a field where that voice, that written voice is probably part of the puzzle, right? Any insight there to share?
Yeah. So I think like so summary, we have about 5 sentences, 5 to 6 sentences, and it's following a structure. It's saying who you are, how long have you been doing it, and what is your area of expertise. We talk about areas that you specialize in as a way to complement that, and kind of blending in a different combination of soft and hard skills, kind of proven track record, things that resonate. Now, while you're doing that, you want to sort of tailor it towards what they're looking for in the job. So someone who's really good at engaging audiences via captivating content, make sure that you write that in your summary. Now, with the keywords, those really more fall in the skills section. So technically, I usually aim for 15. So as long as you're putting 15 keywords and you're following this formula, then it still can sound, natural. The other thing to consider is people get that resumes are really like a caption. You can't fit it all into the 1 or 2 page resume that you have. And they know that on their end as well. So they're not expecting you to write a novel. They know that you're kind of working within the small amount of real estate that you have, and they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Usually when recruiters analyze resumes, it's to see, do you meet the qualifications? Can you deliver results? Not so much about the tone, but obviously you want to meet.
Yeah, nice. So write that truthful resume and make sure that those 15 keywords are in that skill section, and you're going to hit all of those points there, which is great. And then anything else is bonus, is basically what I'm hearing. Nice. There's several questions that are coming in here. Let me pick and choose. There are a few questions about. So one question specifically to changing the titles that you've had in the past, which I assume can create some resistance from some job seekers. Shaina asks, where did the question go? Yes, wouldn't it, oh no, Rachel asks, wouldn't it raise a flag in a reference check or a background check if your title is inaccurate?
Yeah, it definitely could. Reference checks don't happen as common as you would think. But again, my recommendation to do this only comes if it's a very close call. So in the example I gave before, the talent acquisition specialist is really doing sales work. They're just doing within the line of recruiting. So it's like a relabeling of the title. If you're doing something that is completely unrelated, I wouldn't recommend changing the title, because then it might look a little fishy. So I just want to clarify, it's a case-by-case thing. It's kind of like a third string option in addition to tailoring the summary and the headline and the transferable skills. It's like an afterthought. If we have room to do that, go for it. But don't do anything if it's drastically different.
Right. Yeah. It's not that fine line of what becomes focusing in on the major and the important piece of what you did in that job, right? That's very relevant. That's basically a relabeling versus, completely shifting the narrative. That yes, a past employer would say, well, they absolutely didn't do this, right? I assume that if it feels kind of iffy, you probably shouldn't go for it. Is kind of what I'm sensing here. Nice. A few more questions for you. We have 10 minutes, which is great. Someone asked about addressing gaps on a resume due to layoffs. So there have been so many rounds of layoffs, in the past 4 or 5 years, that have come in waves across industries. And, I think that people understand that, hiring managers understand that. But Jonathan, what would you say to someone who, how would you address that gap specifically in a resume to tell a compelling story? We might have lost him. I'll start answering from my perspective, and then Jonathan can add to this. As I just said, right, more and more people have understood that gaps are part of the careers that we have today. We go back 2 generations, even a previous generation, and it was considered normal to join an organization and stay within it for, you know, your whole career. And those gaps, those shifts looked like a problem. Whereas today, I think that people understand that people move around, people take time off, right? And that those gaps maybe are not a problem like they used to be seen. So I would say, just going back to what we were talking about with Jonathan before, it's about owning that narrative. It's really, really important to not, I would say, this is my recommendation, even though I don't work directly on resumes, but I work on career narratives and in interviewing, for example, for people who have gone through layoffs. And it's about deciding on what that narrative is and owning it so that the other person can't fill in the blank for you. Hi, Jonathan. I was just answering the question from my perspective of how to address gaps. How would you recommend doing that on a resume?
How to address a gap on a resume?
Specifically linked to a layoff or to maybe an unchosen gap in a resume.
Yeah, so this is something I speak about often as well. I'll say again, during the post-COVID world, gaps and layoffs have become so not in our control, and has been kind of shifting in the sense that the recruiters, the hiring managers, they really understand this, and it's happened to so many people that it's become normal. So there's much less termination. Oftentimes the gaps are under a year or under 2 years. So what they're
We've lost you again, Jonathan. But I think what I was sensing is that it was a similar answer to mine, right? So create that narrative for yourself, own it, put it in your documents, talk about it. Don't let it be an elephant in the room in the interview and in networking situations as well. Let me see what other questions we have here. Um, mm, mm, mm. Any advice for someone who pivoted and is looking to pivot back? Beth, what a great question. These continuous shifts. I would say, again, own that narrative, figure out what skill sets, what you learned and acquired, how you grew, what has been added to your abilities, your competencies with the new venture that you went into, that first pivot out of the original industry. And think about how that adds value to you coming back to what you wanted to do. And I think that many people will say, it's totally fine to want to go back to something that you miss, right? And as long as you say, I had this adventure, this is what I learned, and now I'm really clear on the fact that I want to go back to this thing, and here's why, right? That why narrative is going to be a really big piece here. Wonderful. I think we have time for one more question. Jonathan, who is back with us again. Let's see. Career gap, we've talked about that. We've had a few questions about this. Sections and kind of coach, make it great resource download, please. Yeah, Dorian, we'll see if we can turn this into a resource. I think that's a great thing. You're asking whether these tips can be put into a document for people to have, and I will look into that, especially given that Jonathan's had so much trouble with his connection here. So sorry about that, everyone. Let's see. Faye has asked, could you provide some insight on finding new career paths? I'm interested in doing something different, but I'm unclear about how to find the options that could use my work experience and skills. So many of us have been in this situation, Jonathan included, right? He talked about how he shifted careers early on in his career and he had the courage to do it. And it does take courage, I think. It's a bold move. Faye, what I would say is, if you're making a career shift, you want to make sure that you're doing it towards something that gives you either purpose or more energy or makes you happier to get up every day, right? There are different things that everyone looks for. I would say first get really clear on what you're looking for. Jonathan, I'm answering a question from Faye about how to find that next step, that pivot, if you're not sure what you want to do. So I'll share a little bit about my thoughts on it, and then I'd love to wrap up with your thoughts as well. So I would say, yeah, first figure out what is it that is really important to me? Is it lifestyle? Is it work-life balance? Is it a purposeful career? What does that mean to you? Is it being in the office or not being in the office? Like, figure out what that looks like. So that's really an important place to start. And then I would say, go back into the work that you have been doing. And there are things that you're not going to love, but they're things that you really enjoy. And those are skill sets, they're competencies, they're parts of your personality that you can use to do great work. And they're also your values, right? The things that really guide you in your decision making and in the kinds of cultures that you're interested in. And I would take time figuring out what those things are. So make that list of skill sets, of competencies, of personality traits that you enjoy using, of the values that are important to you in your work. And with both kind of that more structural importance, so like purpose, lifestyle, culture, and then also the skill sets that you enjoy using, those two lists will guide you in the right direction. It's a starting point, right? And I could go on, and there's a whole coaching moment that could happen around this space. So I wish I actually could talk to you right now. But Jonathan, to wrap us up, when those clients come to you and they say, I want a career pivot, I'm unhappy where I am for whatever reason, and they're not quite ready to build that resume, what do you recommend they take as steps to find that clarity? If you're still with us, can you hear me? I don't think you can. At least we can't hear you, Jonathan. But I'd be really curious to hear what Jonathan has to add to this, because he might take a different first, second, and third step than I recommend. But thank you to all of you who have joined us today and stuck around. Please check out what we're doing at the Muse. You can book time with me. You can book time with Jonathan, and really use that code that we're going to be putting in the chat here to have a discount to our sessions. Give it a try if you're thinking of finding clarity, if you're thinking of how to build that narrative when you're going into the interviews, or really looking for the support. And I highly recommend working with Jonathan. He has a fabulous, fabulous track record with building really strong documents. So go seek that help there. And we will also, with Jonathan, try to get to as many questions here as we can, and we'll try to answer them in the Fairygodboss community. So thank you again for sticking around. Thank you, Jonathan, out there in California, for showing up today. I will loop back with him. Everyone, best of luck with these pivots. Let us know your thoughts, reach out, share your journey on the Fairygodboss community. And we look forward to seeing you next month with more topics on Coach Connect Live. Bye, everyone. Have a good one.